Hello, my name is Sheena with Rise Wellness, and this is Activate Your Genius. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are going to be talking about Gene Key 55. This is the transformational passage from the Shadow of Victimization to the gift and Siddhi, or highest destiny path of freedom. This is such an exciting journey, and I'm so glad to have you. And I wanted to preface it with something that I haven't done in the other videos, and that is really just an invitation, a reminder to be gentle with yourself. As you take in this information, some of these concepts may be new to you. As you experience the unfamiliarity of them, some feelings and thoughts may come up. And be gentle with yourself. As we talk about victimization, we're going to be talking about times that have not served you, and maybe ways that you have held on to those experiences. And as they potentially bubble up to the surface, they might evoke some emotions within you. So I think the most important disclaimer is to be gentle with yourself. You know, as I have undergone my own spiritual journey, there's been so many talks about an ego death. And so as I started exploring my shadows, my beginning process was, how do I kill off my ego? How do I have this ego death that I hear about so much? And what I really had to understand was that ego is our subconscious. It's really our reptilian brain, and it has done everything to keep us alive. It has adapted to 100% of the environment and traumas that we've experienced, and it's conditioned itself in order to stay alive. So we have to have some grace to that reptilian brain. It doesn't serve us to try and kill it off. As I have explored all of my inner child and the inner workings of me, I've had to do the opposite of try and kill it off and make peace with it and become friends with the way that it adapted to keep me alive. So that's just a disclaimer that I want to start this video off with, as that reminder to be kind to yourself as you take in this information. The other disclaimer is that this might get long because there's a lot of information to cover. So the last gene that we talked about was the 22nd gene, which is the highest destiny path of grace. And with the 55th gene's transmission, we learn that these two embody a really potent and profound message in this group. The 22nd gene was about our evolutionary force, our involutionary force of moving from spirit to body. We chose to incarnate as a human. And the 55th gene describes our evolutionary force, and that's moving from matter to spirit. That's our process back into the cosmos. We're alive at a deeply romantic time. In the movies, this is the time when the prince kisses Sleeping Beauty and she magically awakens. And as she wakes up, all of the world is transformed. That's what we're going through right now. So the dilemma of this 55th shadow is external validation. And what is external validation but the need to know that we exist? So this path, this passage to freedom comes from an unlearning process, stripping away all of the things that kept us alive for so long. Enlightenment is our natural state. Freedom is at the core of who we are. We just have all these layers that have made it seem unattainable or out of reach. So, you know, we keep being told to drop the ego, and that's how we're going to experience this true freedom. But what does that even mean? How do you drop your ego? How do you relinquish the grip and ties on that? Well, we have to understand what we're looking for. In our seek for freedom, we call it money, we call it recognition, we call it happiness, we call it liberation, we call it love. This freedom is our freedom from suffering, right? The suffering is what drives us for peace and solace. We seek because we're suffering. We're looking for freedom from the suffering. Call it what you want, but that's what it is. We want a freedom from suffering. We might find that in finances. We might find that in relationships. We might find that in the perfect place to live or job to have. But what we're seeking is that freedom from suffering. So as I have contemplated this gene key, I come to know how deeply destabilizing it is. It took me a long time to get to this place to try and even interpret this gene and teach it, because my contemplation went deep and dark sometimes. And that's another thing that I want to say for anybody that's choosing to do shadow work or sacred play, as I like to call it. But as you're being kind to yourself and gentle, as you're experiencing all these things come up, I encourage you to spend about 10% on your shadow and about 90% on the gift and highest destiny path or siddhis, especially if you're contemplating the gene keys. Because as you do shadow work and you come up with all of these victim patterns, you can get stuck there. And it's really important to put your focus on the teachings. What did you learn from those tough experiences? Focus on the lessons and how you've grown, rather than have too much attachment on the deep parts of your unconscious being. And that's what a shadow is. As Carl Jung says, these are the deeply unconscious parts of our being. These are our survival traits, or toxic traits even. So all other genes have 3 words, and they're part of a spectrum. This one is unique where it's 2. You have the shadow of victimization, and you have the gift and the siddhi of freedom. So this one in itself has to be contemplated differently. It's already different. The language about it is already different. There's only 2 dimensions to this concept or attitude, which I think is why the freedom component is both the gift and the siddhi, because you are either going to play the role of the victim of your circumstance, or you're going to take full responsibility for your situations. There's only 2 ways. You either play the victim or you're free from playing the victim. So at a low level of frequency, human beings look outside of ourselves. When we experience emotional highs or lows, we want to validate it from something. We need to attach a reason behind why we feel the way that we feel. So at the high end of the emotional spectrum, we see joy as as an effect rather than a cause. We think that there's a reason why we've attained this joy. It came as the reaction to something, as the consequence of something that we did. And because of this, we end up spending our lives chasing whatever's going to give us that joy, because we think the end result is the joy. So at the low end of the emotional spectrum, we play the blame game. We blame anything from the food that we've eaten to why we're feeling bad, to our partners, to our government, for the reasons that we're not feeling joy. So the human tendency to look for these outer causes of our moods is our biggest addiction on the entire planet. Honestly, it's the addiction to the search for fulfillment. It's not fulfillment itself. I think this particular concept is my conundrum with the dogmatic religious approach. I grew up Catholic, and on the one hand, I like the fellowship of the church. I like the idea of learning the messages in the Bible, even if I do believe the Western translation has lost a lot of the messages. But I don't like the fact that heaven is portrayed as this external place, because it keeps us forever on the path of seeking. In 2019, I did a yoga teacher training program, And in that, I read the Bhagavad Gita for the first time. And all of a sudden, I had this teaching that nirvana or heaven lay within me. And that was such a novel concept to me that all of a sudden, this place of refuge, this kingdom of heaven, is in here. I had never heard that language before. I always thought it was something that I attained to. It's something that I find in my afterlife. Even my spiritual awakening, I believed, was this passing, this refuge on the other side of a spiritual awakening. I had no idea that all of these concepts and all of these things were inside me, not something on a path to seeking, a path to discovery that you get mostly in the afterlife. This was the first breakthrough in my spiritual awakening was, oh my God, I already have the power and it's in here. It's not something that I look for. As the saying goes, one of the devil's greatest tricks is to get people to look for God. And that's what I think that the church does a lot, is it puts people on this path of seeking God as this external being or force or entity or whatever. So the frequency that pulls us out of our shadow victim place is understanding. It's understanding how you have played the victim of your own circumstances, of your own unconscious belief patterns. There's a great spiritual teacher, Gurdjieff, that says, in order to escape from prison, one first has to understand that one is in prison. So this gene carries a universal theme through all of the genes, really. I mean, I could say that this one is the foundation for all the other genes. And I know I tend to say that about some of the other ones as well, especially the bookends, the 63rd and the 64, and the 1 and the 2. But this one is understanding that the shadow frequency, and we've talked about this a little bit in the other videos, but the understanding that the shadow frequency is your victim consciousness. It's how you're playing victim. And so this one in particular, the shadow of victimization, is this all-encompassing concept of where's your victim hiding? In all of the genes, the shadow is where is your victim hiding? And it calls it out in a specific way, whether it's doubt or confusion or turbulence or dishonor, are the genes that I've put out so far. And this one, victimization, it's just the whole concept of the fact that you play the victim, the fact that the victim is hiding throughout every shadow frequency and all of the other genes. There's a universal law that says what comes around goes around. And this is the law that the shadow fails to see. The law of this is expressed in the Bible as you sow, so shall you reap. And this is true on an energetic level, but we don't usually have the patience to see it materialize on our material plane. We think it's going to happen overnight or really fast, and it happens in the course of a lifetime. It does always come through. I don't believe, and the gene keys will say this also, that our karma goes from lifetime to lifetime, but who knows, as we learned in the highest destiny path of truth, what's true for you may not be true for me. But how do we know? How do we really have an answer to whether or not our karma goes from one lifetime to another? But I don't think that it does. I think that all of our karma is in this lifetime. I also think it's important to kind of understand things in a different way. As I sort of touched on earlier, it's like sometimes we think that, you see bad things happen to good people, and you think that is a result of something that they did, and you're like, how does something bad happen to someone good? And as I experience traumas in my life, and I thought I was a good person, why is this happening to me? I was thinking that that was the result of something bad I had done. But as I have experienced traumatic experiences, I can now come into the other side of that is if I didn't experience that trauma, I wouldn't have the effect of this deep feeling of peace that I have now. You don't know one without the other. That's just how we operate. So victimization is a frequency field that we literally live in. It's our shadow state. We become the victim of our complexities, of our inner turmoil, which then creates our outer reality. We're constantly creating the universe around us, starting with our inner thoughts and feelings and beliefs. So as you activate your genius on this one, instead of thinking, what is freedom? I invite you to contemplate, where do I not feel free? Where do I not feel free in my life? Is it in my relationship? Is it in my finances? Is it in my living arrangement, my job, my body, my spirit? Where am I seeing myself as a victim? Where am I playing the victim? And again, this might be a hard concept to bring up, to consider yourself playing the victim, playing the role as the victim. But we play the victim to know that we exist. It's all part of that external validation. As long as we suffer, we exist, we're there. As long as we suffer, we have an identity. So from our ego place, our ego wants to keep strengthening its identity, and it does so by attaching to things. It attaches to suffering. It's almost addicted to suffering because that strengthening of the ego is more confirmation that we exist, that we're alive. So as you contemplate this gene, be gentle with yourself. Be gentle as you relinquish your ties on that ego, because it just wants to know that it exists. It wants to know that it is part of something. It's connected to something. It's alive. If you aren't suffering, you literally have nothing to hold on to in life. No opinions, no friends, no agendas. From the ego place, that's terrifying. It's like you're an empty shell. And true freedom is a freedom of being that empty vessel, that empty shell that gets constantly filled. So, like I said, to the ego, that seems terrifying. Freedom, honestly, in its full concept of true freedom, is terrifying to the shadow. So as we move through this passage, all of these genes are a pathway to letting go, releasing our attachment to everything, letting go of all our agendas. And we humans, we carry a lot of hidden agendas. And the reason that I love to put out these gene key videos is because I want to spread the awareness on what these hidden agendas are. And as we do that, we no longer keep them hidden. We find out how they are serving us, or most likely prohibiting us from our true level of freedom, and they're blocking us. And that awareness and identifying and labeling it and seeing how it shows up in our body and what it feels like, and every conversation that we have with someone that's uncomfortable, taking the time to sit in that discomfort, identify it, figure out where it's come up early in our life, that's so empowering. And at the same time, it's so scary. It's so hard. It's so hard to sit in our discomfort. And we're externally validated through our shadow frequencies that are in our collective field all the time on how we should play the victim or how to stay small. And so stepping into our power is a threat to the ego, and in some cases it's a threat to our life as we know it, in the form of the relationships that we have, the family dynamic that we have, the relationship to our job, to our suffering, to ourself. It changes things when we add this awareness. So Oscar Wilde has a famous quote that says, if there's one thing worse than being talked about, it's not being talked about. It's just all of us want to validate our existence in some way or another. But true freedom doesn't care about any of that. True freedom doesn't attach to anything. You have to allow freedom to unveil itself, though, because freedom is our natural state. And we have so many layers and conditioning patterns and these belief systems that we've adopted that make us believe that freedom is this journey way out here that we may never attain to. Freedom is something that happens after we die. You know, we have to realize that freedom is deep in our core, and it's our true state. It's our most true state. So I'm going to tell you something, to be honest with you, that the more you contemplate this question about where do you not feel free, the more likely you are going to have these feelings and these victim patterns come to the surface. And that's the journey that I've been on this week, and I can tell you at times that it feels like an existential crisis. You know, I've been consumed by thoughts about old relationships, about times in my life where I've literally been imprisoned, literally and metaphorically, by myself and by others. And honestly, so much of it has been by myself. And I've had to think about times in my life where I have played the victim and I've held on to that identity for far longer than I needed to, because I wasn't aware of it. I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I didn't know, because, you know, when you experience trauma, there are times that you are the victim of an experience, but you victimize yourself when you continue to identify with that role of the victim. When you continually call yourself a victim, you share these stories with others about how you've been a victim, you're just strengthening that role, and the external validation that you get from society as they hear your stories, they keep you in that low frequency. Yeah, there's a conundrum about it, right? Because you want to connect with others. You think in our world right now, we have the Me Too movement. Me Too movement is, I connect with your story. I can connect with your place of being a victim. And here's how, here's mine. And so we have to be really careful on when we share, how we share, that we share from a healed place, that we've moved through the passage of victimhood, that we can share our story with the people who've earned the right to hear that story. Because from a shadow place, when we just play the victim and externalize that in society, we can become even more deeply entrapped by that victimhood, because it's going to get so much support and validation from others. So in my experience, something really subtle occurs within, and you gradually begin to drop stuff. And as you do, you notice yourself becoming more open, becoming lighter. I love the analogy that Eckhart Tolle uses in the book A New Earth, when he's talking about meeting with a woman who suffered deeply in her life. And as he talks to her, a shift begins to happen, and she notices not just the places of suffering in her body, but she starts to conceptualize the space around the suffering. And once she realizes that there's a space around the suffering, immediately she becomes lighter. Immediately she starts to feel a little bit more free in her body from the suffering. There's all of a sudden a little bit of peace and space around the suffering. And that is absolutely my experience, is finding the space around the suffering and spending more time in that space, spending more time being curious about that space. It's almost comedic how we go from this desperate search for freedom to this comedic realization of, oh my God, I can't even believe I was playing the victim about that. Poor me drama that I was carrying for so long. You know, yes, there's still a longing inside of me for a freedom, a deep sense of freedom, but my relationship to it has changed. I now can realize the times that I'm making myself miserable. And I can play with that of, why am I self-sabotaging right now? Why am I playing a victim to that? Why am I attached to that? Because all I know about that attachment is that it's going to lead me to suffering. Why am I doing that to myself? Why am I distracting myself from my own pain? You know, as somebody that would drink alcohol or smoke weed or be really social and contain a full calendar of things to do, what I was doing was distracting myself from my own pain. And by connecting with others, it was really a false connection, right? Because I wasn't getting the true meaningful conversations with people. I was really just hiding from myself. So Eckhart Tolle has this quote that I love that says, suffering is necessary until you realize that it's unnecessary. And that's what this victimization gene passage is all about, is you've suffered long enough, you're here now, you're interested in diving deeper into some of these genes and these topics, and now you can realize that your suffering was only trying to get you to this place, to add this awareness, to learn these new concepts, to understand the teaching behind all of the traumatic experience that all of us have had. So we start taking the suffering inside of us. We did this in Gene Key 36 with the turbulence. We invited the storm in. And so as we do this, we invite in, on the victimization of the passage to freedom, we really invite in the suffering from all of our loved ones, all of humanity, all living things, all of the earth's suffering. And we invite it into ourselves, because this inner reality is creating this outer reality. So once we take it all in and we sit with it and we offer it grace and compassion and understanding and give it the time that it needs to shake us up, we come to the other side of it. And all of a sudden, the external drama around us begins to die down. We stop pushing, we stop controlling, we stop trying to have these expectations about how everything should unfold, and something magic happens. We enter the drift. We float, we accept, we love. And everyone that talks about freedom always talks about flight. You know, freedom is the opposite of victimhood. Victimhood is heavy. It burdens us. It keeps us down. When we feel yucky feelings of depression and sadness and grief, they're heavy feelings. They're heavy feelings to hold on to. And when we strengthen our attachment to it, when we strengthen our victim story to it, they become even heavier. And that's a real big burden to hold on to. So to be a victim is really to be weighed down by all these worries, these memories, these plans, this life. Even the victimhood of being afraid of death, you know, it weighs on us in all these different ways. To be free is to feel lighter than air. You know, it's to be unburdened by all the agendas. It's to be free to live the life that you were intended to live all along. Even if it doesn't look like what everybody else's life looks like, especially if it doesn't look like what everybody else's life looks like. Because not all of us do this work. Not all of us invite in the storm. Some of us stay distracting and disassociating and numbing, you know? And the thing about freedom, you can't chase after it. You can't run out, you can't sell everything, you can't become a monk, you can't go, you know, give up all of your possessions and make it happen. I wanted to. I've honestly wanted to. And what I've realized is that all you can do is breathe. It's relax. It's to be patient. Freedom comes on its own. It comes in its own time without any of your thoughts, without any of your actions. It just happens. It just, as you understand and contemplate the way that you suffer and the different victim patterns around your suffering, and you relinquish your grip on them and you slowly detach from them, you just start to feel a deeper sense of peace. And what that peace really is that freedom. You know, Richard Rudd talks about an Eastern expression, wu wei. And in Italian, this is my favorite phrase that I've ever learned, and it's la dolce far niente, the sweet art of doing nothing. What a beautiful way to live your life. You're not chasing happy moment to happy moment. You're not searching and seeking enlightenment and heaven on earth and nirvana. You're just accepting life on life's terms. You're inviting in the storm and you're weathering it, and you're finding the teaching moments and lessons in all of it. And as you do this, more of that space starts entering your body. You feel, as you relinquish your attachments on these different things, you feel more of that spaciousness. That spaciousness is freedom. That freedom is peace. That peace is light. That light is far less dense than what we're used to carrying. This gene is all about romancing freedom. You can't rush into it. This gene is a feminine spirit. It wants to be courted and romanced. You know, you don't come after it like a bull in a china shop. You just let it unfold. Let the romance kind of wave through the air. You just follow the mystery with this trust and this faith that you're not used to. So the repressive shadow of victimization is complaining. You know, this is when we inwardly complain about our lives. We have it so bad, poor me, why me? And the reactive nature of this is to blame, which is complaining externally. And we pin it on someone or something else, and it's brilliant in a way because it makes sure that the story continues, because now you're a victim in someone else's story. And you know, any concept that you hold on to, that you grip, that all has the capacity to trap you. So every one of those stories that you're sharing, that you're playing the victim, that you're validated through their empathy and support of how you are the victim, just keeps attaching you to it. Freedom is knowing that there's no right or wrong. You know, it comes back to what we thought about in the passage to truth. You move out of the drama entirely when you stop having to defend one way or the other way. This is right, therefore this has to be wrong. This is true, therefore this has to be false. When you step outside of that, and you allow everyone to be free to their own beliefs, to their own truths. They're not universal. What's true for you may not be true for me, and that's okay. We become free to our opinions, free from the drama. When we're no longer holding on and gripping to these beliefs, we become free from them. And all humans are eventually going to go through this process, where they're going to realize their state of inner freedom. This is about allowing yourself to just simply be. The sweet art of just being. And if the way that you are changes, then let it change. And if the way that you are never changes, then let it not change. Simply be who you were always destined and meant to be. It's all inside. No one has to show us who to be. That's the beauty of this gene, is it's all in here, covered up by all of these layers. True freedom has nothing to do with how we experience time on this material plane. It's not an effect. It's a kind of ever expanding consciousness, and it arises spontaneously inside of us as we begin to understand how deeply victimized we have been by our own core beliefs. You know, like I said at the beginning of this, our ego is like 95% subconscious behavior. From the ages of 0 to 7, we're just this blank canvas, and we get all these programs and messages from our family of origin, from our environment, from what we see on TV, from our peer groups, from our teachers, and we adopt this all as our identity, as who we are, as our ego. So this process of unlearning keeps freeing us from all these societal expectations about who we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to do. And we go back to our true nature of just simply being. We haven't even experienced this in generations. We've been the human doing. This passage to freedom is about becoming the human being that we were originally intended to be. What's really interesting is before I contemplated this gene, I started having these visions of the Hindu goddess Kali. So it was so interesting to me. I always let my intuition guide me onto what gene do I need today. And similar to the I Ching, there's so much philosophy behind that. You know, when in the I Ching or in the gene keys, you open up a book, you open the book up, and you just look at the sentence that speaks to you, and you read it, and you realize, like, oh my God, how do they know that I'm going through this? And that's what this gene was to me. And it was after already having this vision of Kali and trying to figure out, why am I having these thoughts of Kali, and what is this? And as I became more interested in digging deeper into this, I learned that by studying this gene, that in the Indian Vedic tradition, we have these evolutionary stages that are known as the yagas. The darkest stage of all of these is the Kali Yaga, and this is the dark goddess of time and change. And we're coming towards the end of that era right now, the epic after the fall. So ever since we fell from grace, humans have been seeking our way home. And we're about to begin to experience once again the universal quantum field of connecting and experiencing the kingdom of heaven coming to earth. It's already been so deeply ingrained in every strand of our DNA that our final destiny must be to witness this heaven on earth. This is where we get to experience the Garden of Eden and live peacefully there forever. This is our happily ever after. So what I think is so exciting about this gene is there is a genetic mutation that's slowly colonizing our species, and the old human is literally going to be bred out of humanity as we know it. This book was published in 2009 originally, and it talked about this happening in the future. This is 2022 now. It is happening. It is happening. These children are already living and will continue to live. These children are going to be different from us because they don't emotionally engage with a victim pattern at all. They carry such a high frequency in their DNA that it's actually going to transform their families. These families are going to live in a state of more peacefulness than they've ever experienced. You know, we're really going to start, we've always needed to, but really taking the time to learn from our children. We're not here to teach our children everything. We're here to guide them and learn from them. And this new species of children that are being born are so special. Because they don't carry that victim consciousness, they don't have the fear-based life that most of us are used to living. And this is magical. This is so amazing. One of the other major changes that we're going to come through in our current and evolving species is moving out of the individual element of the I into the stage of the we. And this is us fully, truly absorbing the truth of humanity is that we are a collective we. We've had so many things that have tried to separate us. You know, we try to hold on to our story is so unique from others. Our life is so different. We're so removed. We're so separate. This separateness is such an illusion. And that's sometimes what we actually feel as this deep wound is our desire to connect that can sometimes be validated externally as our separateness. But really that desire to connect is the opposite. It's knowing that we're all fractals of the same one. We're all connected to the same source. So once we start stepping into that, we go from the I to the collective we. So if you've ever studied the life cycle of a dragonfly, it's really incredible. It mutates into these several versions of a nymph. It starts in the water, and they're a really remarkable predator species. They can live on eating most anything in the water. And then they keep mutating and shedding their skin and going through these different evolutionary stages of being a nymph, or molts as they're called, as they shed their skin and go through these different periods. And then one day, all of a sudden, some sleeping gene is triggered and they reach out of the water and they attach to some living plant, and something completely out of character happens. And now for the first time being out of the water, they allow the sunlight in. And after a few hours of this, the sunlight catalyzes it. Their 4 crumpled little wings appear that are the vaporization of this water from their body, and their body uncurls. The dragonfly uses its old life to literally transform it, and all of a sudden it's a dragonfly, and it's no longer a water species, and it flies. And there's so many metaphors behind this mutation in these life cycles, because this is what it is to be human. We go through all these emotions. We think of water, our tears, our salt, our sweat, everything that we shed, release, these waters, these vapors. And these emotions, when we let them in, creates the awareness that allows us to go through these series of mutations, these spiritual awakenings, these moments of enlightenment, these different identities that we take on, these mutations that we have, and we have no idea where the next one is going to take us. We literally just have to sit back and trust and surrender to the process. So pretty incredible, pretty amazing. As we enter the gift stage of freedom, the 59th Siddhi of transparency awakens within us. These actually awaken, and these come together to awaken at the same time. And this gift of, or this highest destiny path of transparency, is just like the dragonfly's wings, transparent. And humans are being forced to become more transparent in this evolutionary path. And we're needing to allow life to crack us open, fully mutate us. Every hidden agenda, as we come to the Siddhi of freedom, must be aired and destroyed. Let's breathe into that for a second. When a person is freed from their shadow states, they become the creative conduit that creates a life they love. As they start to live the life they love, they begin to awaken others on this physical plane. It starts with one. It's so interesting. It could take 1,000 frequencies of a gift state to bring one person into the Siddhic level. And yet it could take one person at the Siddhic level to awaken 1,000 people out of their shadow victimization state. It's really powerful, the way that we're all connected. So there's a really powerful threefold awakening sequence. And in metaphorical language, 1987 was the gestation period. 2012, which you've heard so much about, that was the birth. And 2027 is the coming to fruition of this new order, this new world, this huge genetic mutation that sweeps through the solar plexus. That's our gut brain. We think that we're operating from here, our mind, but universe keeps telling us over and over again that our feelings, our emotions have such a deeper hold on us than our mind. This is reptilian. This is survival conditioning patterns. What did we do yesterday to survive? Let's repeat that pattern and do it again. That's limited. These emotions, this is the nectar here. This is the solar plexus. This is our willpower. So we're coming into this huge transmutation. In the beginning of 2027, we'll begin gradually falling into a state of awe. We finally discover the wonder of simply being. There is nothing left on earth to do but enjoy this garden that we have created, that we are back to. We have come full circle back to this Garden of Eden. The world has yet to experience an enlightened couple. And as we go through this transparency and this freedom, we will begin to experience the first dual enlightenment, the first enlightened couple. This is the I going into the we, and we will know finally that the deepest wound in all of humanity has finally been healed. This is the wound that was symbolized in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. Since Adam and Eve, we have had this separation of the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine, and one has been blaming the other for the fall of Eden, the fall of Rome, the fall of humanity. And once we come to experience for the first time ever the enlightened couple, we have transformed, we have reclaimed or claimed for the first time the enlightened couple. The cup is overflowing. There's no longer my cup and your cup. It's our cup. It's one cup, this one chalice. It's constantly overflowing. It's so beautiful. And these sacred marriages are going to create these communities. These communities are going to keep spreading and reaching a far greater place. It's going to be this unbelievable energy field. This will be the core of our new communities. There's only one awareness in the relationship. It's the we. We no longer fall in love. We rise in love. Love isn't down here. We don't sacrifice. We don't give up. We don't fall victim to. We rise in love. That is so powerful and divine. And it's so exciting because we don't even know what that is yet. We haven't even experienced it yet. We haven't experienced a full, truly enlightened couple ever. This is going to bring back the sanctity of marriage. Marriage and the human life that we've known has become this contract, right? The sanctity of marriage is this institutionalized governing force to save us a couple bucks on our taxes, but it came from the root, the origin of this divine yin and yang connection, this enlightenment shared between the dualities, between the male and the female, and I say that, but don't forget, we are both yin and yang. We are both male and masculine within us. So I don't mean literally this has to be a sacred union of male to feminine. Absolutely not. It never has had to be. But when we repair the identities around the masculine parts of us and the feminine parts of us, we will begin to experience something that we've never experienced before. We will vibrate at a higher frequency that will chemically lift us free from all genetic fears. We will no longer fear true freedom because we will operate from awareness that is beyond the mind and its concerns about the future. Ultimate freedom has nothing to do with our life circumstances. It is the freedom of allowing the self to dissolve into the waves of the ocean. It is the freedom that is born through one's absolute trust in life. We become more transparent. As we go through this, our bodies are no longer producing the same chemicals that are created by fear, and it's resulting of our consumption of far less salt. We're going to stop craving them. Our new species of humans may even have an intolerance or allergy to salty products or meat. It's so interesting. As we evolve into this freedom, all of these other species around us have to evolve too. So what this is going to start looking like is looking at animals as one of us, no longer consuming them the way that we do. The new children being born might actually have an allergy to eating meat. So what's so interesting is nature always knows what it's doing. And in order to release it from our system, we first have to have the pendulum swing the other way. So right now, during this current transitional human period, there's more salts in order to detoxify from the past, to be collectively purified, which is the hidden reason for the worldwide revolution in processed foods. So as we relinquish the salt from our diet, it goes back into the ocean. It purifies all living beings. Our planet begins to heal. Animals are free to roam. Plants and forests are free to blossom, free to spread, and we simply enjoy being alive. The force of fear is abolished entirely. Human beings have always been the gardeners. And that's really our role, is to cultivate our thoughts, our ideas, our concepts, actual gardens, grow on earth. All these thoughts, all these concepts are seeds, and we're the gardeners. We get to cultivate it, we get to grow it, we get to live in it, we get to harvest we reap what we sow, right? So it keeps going on. Even our tie to money goes away. Money is this living consciousness that reminds us of fear. It's this attachment to the victim consciousness. So as our victim consciousness goes away, so does money. So does the way that we operate business. It's no longer about competition and greed. It's about what's good for everyone. How do we act good-natured and transparent and ethical in our beliefs? This gene key is part of the codon ring of the whirlwind, and its amino acid is called histidine, which is literally released during the physical orgasm. So this I becomes we. This we is actually going through like a collective orgasm, a spiraling force of consciousness that ripples throughout all of humanity. And it brings us to higher states of unity and of joy, of elation, of ecstasy. The true nature of illness has always been in our fear of death. As we come out of this victim consciousness on a collective level, we stop fearing death. We recognize that death doesn't even exist. We are immortal beings. We only have a limited time in this physical form, but we are here for eternity. So we learn death is not even really such a thing. The new children emerging are extremely bright. We have to teach them in a new way. We're bringing back apprenticeship. We're honing in on their gifts and their skills, and we're catering to them. We're not sending them to school at a young age to get indoctrinated by a system of old beliefs. Instead, we're giving them the time and the space to roam, to be curious, to play, to experience life. These kids are teaching us. They'll continue to teach us the ability to become apprentice, the ability to explore, the ability for these children to come out of the old belief systems and into something new. They are going to be the masters of relationships. We are going to learn so much from them because they don't have any fear in their system. It's no longer encoded in their DNA, but they can sense it and those around them, and that strengthens their empathy and their compassion for others. Such wisdom in this empathy. I see this in my friends that have kids now. They're so wise beyond their years. You know, we've always said that she's got an old soul, you know, but we're seeing this new species of highly evolved children coming in without this victim consciousness, without this fear. I hope that we can all just take the time to learn from them, play with them, have conversations with them, know what's on their mind, learn what their primary gifts are, and teach them ways to access them. Freedom comes at a price. That price is transparency, and that's what we have to be willing to do now. We have to own every negative feeling, every tendency within us, and take full responsibility of it. If we want to see this new wave of consciousness, we've got to be transparent. We've got to give up our shit. We're no longer victims. We can't play the victim anymore. I'm going to give you this quote from Richard Rudd, which I love. I think it's so beautiful. I think there's so much poetry in the Gene Keys, and this is my favorite. It says, "Once you are transparent and truthful with yourself and others, this seed of the future awareness can take root in you. Even though it may not be present in your genetics as a physical mutation, you can still resonate strongly to the energy field behind it. Furthermore, if you are open-hearted and humble enough, this awareness will inevitably waken within you, and it will use your life as a launching pad to soar into the skies of freedom and prepare the ground for the true world of high romance that is yet to come." Wow. We are on the brink of something so powerful. We're so close. We're feeling it. I'm feeling it. I know if you're here and you're still listening that you've been feeling it. The world is waking up. We are taking responsibility. We are doing the shadow work. We are going within. We are healing from old generational wounds. We are starting to think more creatively. We are starting to free ourselves from old conditioning and old patterns that no longer serve us. Our ego brain, thank you for keeping us alive. Thank you for surviving and adapting. We thank you for everything that you've done. We can detach from you now. When we add more consciousness and awareness to the things that we do, we operate differently. We pay more attention. We don't just take on someone else's thoughts and adopt them as our own. We question them. We feel them. I'm so grateful that you're here. As I mentioned, this activating your deep genius is about thinking, where are you playing the victim in your life? How are you playing the victim? How does it show up? Is it your attachment to money, to your old stories, your old traumas and wounds? Are you attached to your place of living? Are you attached to your suffering and your family of origin or the family you're creating now? What is it? Where is it? Can you explore how it shows up? How can you relinquish the ties on those old constructs? Thank you so much for being here. I love you so much. I'm so grateful for you. If you've made it all the way through, I'm so appreciative to you. Give it a like, give it a follow, subscribe to my channel, check out my other videos, follow me on Instagram at Rise Wellness Coaching. Send me a DM, let me know how this information is coming through to you, how you're activating it. Are you feeling these communities? Are you bringing these communities to life? Where are you on this journey? Tell me. I want to hear all about it. I love you so much. You are so worth freedom. You've always been worth freedom. This is just your return to freedom. Get rid of the old. We're in with the new. I love you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being you. Namaste. The light in me sees and honors the light in you.